So I think I'm quite positive and quite optimistic about the industry. As I said at the beginning of my session this morning, I think there are some really interesting developments. I think there are going to be more changes coming, particularly on the demand side and the market side. If you look at even the last 3 or 4 years, the number of new entrants to the LNG industry, the number of new buyers, the number of new countries that are becoming involved. I think if you look at the technology as well, the solutions may not exist today for floating LNG, say on a commercial level, floating regas, but they will exist over the next 3 to 5 years, I'm pretty sure. I mean, actually FSRUs, the floating regas vessels, are becoming pretty, well, let's say they're more and more widely deployed now, but I think they're going to become more and more customized, high spec vessels, because a lot of the customers are going to require that. And I think this is what's driving a lot of change. The customers, the market is saying, to the suppliers, we need a slightly more bespoke solution. We need you to work with us rather than just coming to the table and saying, here is my 20-year LNG supply deal or my short-term supply deal. We need a bit more creativity. We need collaboration, which is one of the themes that came out of our session this morning. So I know that's sort of more on the demand side, but I suppose being in Asia, that's where I see a lot of activity. And overall, I'm pretty positive. I think going forward, as I say, I think if you take, as an example, small-scale LNG. So at the moment, there aren't really many small-scale vessels in the market that would make commercial sense to charter. So I think that's a big area where we're going to see prices coming down. We're going to see more vessels, more small-scale vessels being constructed, being deployed. And I think we're going to see more of this sort of what I call hub and spoke model, where you have effectively a single terminal or large-scale import terminal. It could be onshore, could be offshore, in a particular market, which you can then deliver into, reload onto smaller vessels, and supply into, in Indonesia, for example, this massively diverse country, loads of different isolated demand centres. At the moment, it doesn't really work because we haven't got the technical solution, the small-scale solution to supply them. But I think we will have in the next 3 or 5 years. I mean, that's just one example. I think also there's going to be more reform on the legal and regulatory side. I think markets are going to open up more. We're going to see more open access type regulations coming through, which means essentially that more players can actually get involved and access those markets. I guess still the key, I think somebody this morning described it quite well as a sort of bottlenecking on the infrastructure side. So you've got, at the moment, a little bit of a disconnect between a pretty well-supplied market in terms of volumes at least. There's a lot of volume in the market trying to find a home. You've got demand centres, the kind of what I call conventional markets like Japan, Korea, Taiwan and so on. But you've also got new markets with a lot of demand, high population growth and so on and so forth. But what's missing at the moment, I think, is that regas import piece, the infrastructure, whether that's an FSRU, an onshore terminal, the pipelines, the processing. And so I think that's an area where we're going to need to see more investment, and we're going to need to see a bit more collaboration, again using that term, between all the different parties involved. Because at the moment, if you take the FSRU sector, that's really been confined to 3 or 4 players thus far. I mean, more players are coming to the market with vessels to charter, but there is opportunity there as well for other stakeholders to get involved in their joint venture, to partner up, to look at deploying a vessel or a project together. I'm looking forward to catching up with people. I was at the event last year in Rome. I was at the event in Singapore. I mean, King & Spalding supports CWC globally. To be honest, I really enjoy coming to this event. I think it's a good time of year. Whether or not it's been a good year or a bad year, people are normally quite happy just to catch up and spend a bit of time before Christmas. So it's good to see some old faces, people I only run into once or twice a year. And then taking what I hear from this event back to Singapore, back to a different market, different part of the world. And I think that's for me, that's really helpful, because different markets learn from each other to an extent. So what's happening in Europe and in the US will impact what's going to happen in Asia and vice versa.